There is something inside you that you refuse to see. A presence coiled in the blind spots of your awareness, shaping your choices, your hatreds, even your loves, without your permission. Carl Jung, the explorer of the psyche's deepest caverns, identified the most dangerous trait a person can possess. Not the capacity for evil, but the absolute refusal to recognize it in themselves. The true peril lies in the unclaimed shadow, the repressed, denied, and disowned parts of the self that, when ignored, grow fangs and claws. This is not mere psychology. It is a law of existence as fundamental as gravity. Just as a man who denies his hunger will eventually starve, one who denies their darkness will be devoured by it. History's greatest atrocities were not committed by those who knew they were monsters, but by those who believed themselves righteous. The inquisitor burning heretics, the tyrant enforcing utopia, the lover who destroys in the name of devotion, all were convinced of their own purity. And that is where the true danger festers, not in the act of evil, but in the illusion of innocence. Jung's warning is a mirror held up to the soul. Do you dare look? Or will you turn away, letting what you refuse to acknowledge steer your life from the depths? The shadow does not disappear when ignored. It only gains strength, whispering through projections, obsessions, and unconscious compulsions. But here lies the paradox. Within that darkness waits not just danger, but liberation. Face it is to reclaim lost power, to unshackle the self from the ghosts of the unseen. To grasp why the unexamined shadow is so perilous, we must first understand its nature, not as a flaw, but as an inevitability. Jung's shadow is not some alien force invading the psyche. It is the self we have exiled. Every time we deem a trait unacceptable, our rage, our greed, our forbidden desires, we do not destroy it. We banish it to the dungeons of the unconscious, where it gathers strength in exile. The more we insist, "I could never be like that," the more we ensure that one day, we will act exactly like that, without understanding why. This is the cruel irony of self-denial. The traits we disown do not vanish. They slip into the driver's seat while we, the so-called conscious mind, remain convinced we are in control. The shadow thrives in duality, in the illusion that light and darkness within us are separate. But Jung's psychology dissolves this binary. The saint is capable of unspeakable cruelty. The sinner carries dormant divinity. A man who prides himself on rationality may erupt in irrational fury when his hidden emotionality is triggered. A philanthropist who secretly craves admiration may grow bitter when her sacrifices go unapplauded. The shadow is not the opposite of who we are. It is the missing fragment, the disowned truth that, when ignored, warps our entire being. Projection is the shadow's favorite trick. What we refuse to see in ourselves, we condemn in others. The homophobe tormented by his own desires, the moralist who revels in shaming others' sins, these are not hypocrites in the simple sense. They are unwitting puppets of their own unconscious, mistaking internal conflict for external threat. This is why Jung insisted that the shadow, when unaddressed, fuels history's darkest cycles. Wars, persecutions, and ideological crusades are rarely born from pure malice. They are born from the collective refusal to look inward, to admit, "This too is me." Yet the shadow is not merely a destroyer. It holds what Jung called the gold in the dark. Our greatest creative power, our vitality, even our authenticity often lie buried in the very aspects we've denied. The artist must tap into raw, chaotic emotion to create. The leader must acknowledge their ambition to wield power wisely. The lover must embrace their own neediness to love fully. Integration is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. Across cultures and epochs, the human psyche has told the same story in different tongues. The story of the double, the hidden self, the beast that wears our face when we are not looking. In ancient Sumer, Gilgamesh wrestled with Enkidu, his wilder half, learning that civilization means nothing without acknowledging the untamed force within. In Greek myth, Narcissus perished not because he loved himself too much, but because he loved only the surface, the reflection that showed none of his flaws, none of his depth. He starved staring at a lie, unable to see the dark waters beneath. These are not mere tales. They are maps of the soul's terrain, warning us that to deny part of ourselves is to court obsession, madness, or worse, a life half-lived. Alchemy, that ancient precursor to psychology, framed this struggle in the language of metals and transformation. The nigredo, the blackening, was the first stage of the great work, the putrefaction where the old, rigid self had to dissolve before the gold could emerge. Jung saw this as the shadow's work, the necessary decay of the persona, the mask we present to the world, so that something more authentic might take its place. But modern man flees this darkness. We plaster over our contradictions with affirmations, drown our doubts in productivity, and wonder why we feel hollow. The alchemists knew what we forget. Decay is not failure. It is the soil from which growth begins. Even nature whispers this truth. The forest fire that seems apocalyptic clears the way for new seeds. The oyster coats its irritant with nacre until it becomes a pearl. So too with the psyche. The very traits we reject, our envy, our laziness, our selfishness, are the grit that, if faced, can polish us into something wiser. The shadow is not the enemy. The enemy is the illusion that we can outrun it. The great paradox of self-awareness is that the moment we stop declaring, "I am not that kind of person," we begin the real work of becoming whole. Jung's shadow theory is not an abstract philosophy. It is a survival manual for navigating relationships, power dynamics, and even societal conflicts. Consider how often we vilify others for traits we secretly harbor. The colleague who bristles at a subordinate's ambition might be confronting her own stifled drive. The politician who crusades against moral decay may be waging war against his own repressed desires. These personal microcosms mirror civilization's grand tragedies, where unexamined shadows escalate into ideological wars. The practice of shadow work begins with a simple but seismic shift. Replacing "that's not me" with "how is this also me?" Practical integration starts with catching the shadow in action. Those moments when our reactions feel disproportionate, when we're inexplicably drawn to or repelled by someone, or when we hear ourselves say, "I don't know what came over me." These are the cracks where the unconscious leaks through. A useful exercise is the mirror of projection. When you feel intense judgment toward another, ask what they reflect about your disowned self. If a friend's neediness annoys you, where might you be neglecting your own vulnerability? If a rival's arrogance triggers you, where have you denied your own hunger for recognition? This is not about self-flagellation, but about reclaiming energy wasted on denial. Every acknowledged shadow trait loosens its grip, freeing us to respond rather than react. In relationships, shadow awareness is the antidote to toxic dynamics. Romantic partners often unconsciously assign each other roles, the responsible one and the spontaneous one, the saint and the sinner, to act out their own split psyches. These contracts crumble when one person begins reintegrating their projections. The responsible partner owning their own rebellious streak, or the free spirit acknowledging their need for stability, transforms friction into fertile ground. Similarly, societal shadows manifest as scapegoating, whether targeting marginalized groups or rival nations. The collective shadow fuels every us versus them narrative. Integration begins with asking, what does this hated other reveal about what we've disowned? Jung's most dangerous sign, the unexamined shadow, is ultimately a crisis of missed potential. We fear the darkness within because we mistake it for a verdict, when in truth, it is an invitation. The parts of ourselves we exile are not mistakes. They are the raw materials of our evolution. To face the shadow is to recover stolen vitality, to transform compulsions into choices, and to trade the fragile mask of perfection for the unshakable weight of authenticity. This is not a one-time ordeal but a lifelong conversation with the self, a sacred spiral where we continually meet, reckon with, and alchemize our depths. The call is urgent, not just for individuals but for our fractured world. Every collective horror, from genocide to environmental devastation, has roots in humanity's refusal to confront its own capacity for destruction disguised as righteousness. Yet the hope lies in the alchemical truth. Shadow work is always, ultimately, creative work. The artist, the healer, the visionary, They are not those without darkness, but those who have learned to dance with it, to let it fuel rather than corrupt. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is your unlived life, your silenced voice, your dormant power. The question is not whether you will confront it, but when. And when you do, you'll find the most surprising truth of all. In the heart of the abyss, there is light waiting.